Cool. Hello, everyone. We are going to go ahead and start our webinar. I got a message for some love for Tim McGraw. I am headed to Nashville for the holiday weekend, so thought I'd pregame with a little country music. Thank you to everyone that is joining us for this webinar. This is our part 3 of our webinar series on plugins, do's, don'ts, and those to download now. This series has been incredibly exciting and fun to host as someone in WordPress. But I think we are just about to start the funnest topic, which is artificial intelligence plugins. We've got a great panel here. We've got some spicy topics and not spicy topics to talk about. And we're really just here to have fun. So if you haven't caught the rest of these sessions, we have recorded them and they're viewable on the WP Engine YouTube as well as on our resource center. So the first of these was more of like a general plugins 101. And then last week we talked about e-commerce and WooCommerce plugins. And then today we are going to talk about artificial intelligence plugins. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover. I'm here to just do some brief introductions. I'm then going to introduce your moderator and host for the day, James Dominy. James spoke at WordCamp Europe and had kind of a great talk, and I'd love to just pick his brain for a few minutes on AI, and then we're going to intro this amazing panel. Every single one of them has their own views, but also several things to talk about in AI. Just a couple of gentle reminders. We've got the webinar chat. Please continue to contribute in the conversation there. But if you have any questions for the panelists, we will be taking those towards the latter half of the webinar. There is a question and answer feature within Zoom. So drop any questions in there. It's much easier for us to kind of track and keep our eyes on questions there. So with that, this is our panel, lovely gentlemen and women. We are going to just start. I'm going to ask James some questions, and then I will let the panelists introduce themselves and kind of talk about their tie to AI. So with that being said, James, I'm going to add you up to the spotlight so that you are here with me. James, can you just kind of introduce yourself and tell me, like, what is your relationship with artificial intelligence?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's James. I'm a technical architect with WP Engine. I mostly work on the hosting side of things, or almost exclusively. So I suppose AI in my very wandering career to get to WP Engine, I once upon a time studied bioinformatics, and a large part of that was studying what back then I suppose was called machine learning, but is closely related, depending on who you speak to, actually the same as modern AI. So I have some sort of formal training in AI modeling. It's by no means up to date. This is sort of 10, maybe 15 years ago. I have a birthday coming soon. But yeah, beyond that, I suppose, like, obviously it's always been a point of casual interest for me. I am a computer scientist by training, and the biology, bioinformatics side of things was sort of a branching out of what I originally intended to do. But obviously the AI aspects of bioinformatics fascinated me probably the most. So yeah, that I suppose sums up my relationship with AI.
Yeah.
Casual user, sort of understander, fairly good at an educated guess occasionally.
I think we've all kind of become dabblers in each and own way in AI and kind of working in the tech space. Now, James, I know you spoke at WordCamp Europe. You hosted a workshop, but can you just tell me a little bit about kind of like what the key points of your talk were? I know this session was recorded, but the recording is not out yet. But tell me just a little bit about your session.
Sure. So the title of the talk was How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love My New AI Overlords, channeling a bit of The Simpsons there, and of course some Peter Sellers. Basically, my take on AI, I had one of those sort of like shower thoughts or bathroom moments a couple of months before the WordCamp, and it was like, you know, the bit that we aren't talking about is that, sure, AI is great and everyone's scared that it's going to take their jobs, but it's not really there yet. And the bit that worried me the most was that it's moving fast, and it's not going to take our jobs, but it is going to make entry-level jobs, or all the jobs that you need. Let me rephrase entry-level, tutorial-level jobs. And I don't mean jobs necessarily in terms of earning money, but that too. Sort of when you're getting into a new field, specifically WordPress, all of the easy stuff that you learn WordPress by doing and making mistakes on, that's the stuff that AI is pretty good at already. And the whole sort of theme of my talk was we need to be careful in the WordPress community that we make sure we don't like knock the rungs out of the ladder behind us. Because those of us who are already making our incomes from WordPress are in a place where we can adapt, we can use the tools, we've already made those mistakes and learned those lessons, and are in a good position to supervise the outputs of bad AI now. People who are getting into it now, like today and in future generations of WordPresses, they don't have that advantage. And there's this kind of catch-22 situation where we're going to have to learn from scratch to use AI by not using AI so we can supervise AI.
Really, I think as we jump into this panel, everyone's got a lot of thoughts and feelings on that. And James, lots of love in the chat for the title of your session and the Dr. Strangelove reference. If y'all haven't met James, he loves a good movie reference. So lots of love there. Okay, well, I think we're ready to jump into kind of just our brief slides on AI overview, and I will let you take it away.
Sure, great. Okay, so just to be very clear, this is not a webinar about going through an exhaustive list of all the plugins that are tagged AI in WordPress.org or all of the AI services that integrate with WordPress, but I just want to sort of lay out some general sort of areas where AI is clearly being used, call out one or two plugins on WordPress.org that are working in that space. It's not necessarily an endorsement. It's just mostly they're going to be the more widely known ones, or they, piqued my curiosity as I was going through the list. So the obvious ones are chatbots, streamlining tasks, SEO, copywriting, image optimization, content creation, etc. And you've got, in the content generation, you've got Imogen, Bertha AI, Jetpack AI. Sorry, image generation would be Imogen, apologies. Accessibility, e-commerce optimization. So the ones that kind of like pique my interest there, there's one called Pricemizer, which is basically using AI to A/B test your price points, which scares me personally as a potential customer. There's Wootomation, which is an AI thing to facilitate Amazon style. If you bought this, you might be interested in that upsell suggestions. Botowski, which is sort of a way to use AI to A/B test your product descriptions and see if you can generate more sales. Another one of interest in the comment moderation thing, which I forgot to add to the slide here, but I thought would be useful because it's another thing about AI that I'd like to talk about, is the plugin Serious Toxic Comments, which is an AI filter for filtering out hate speech, offensive speech, toxic comments in your comment feeds. Another thing, personalized experiences and more. I want to say, I'm going to dive into the and more a bit because there's 2 or 3 more things. Like AI and WordPress has been around for, I'm going to say 6 months for real. Probably about a year. I'm pretty sure that the moment ChatGPT came out with an API, someone started working on a plugin. But we've definitely got to the point now where we're seeing AI spam spamming out plugins, because there are 2 plugins in WordPress.org that have the exact same description but different names, and it's not clear what they do. So that's something interesting to chat about later. And then a couple of misses where I haven't seen WordPress and AI plugins. There's nothing on the education side that I found. And there's nothing on the sustainability side. How do I make my website more power efficient, greener, faster, etc. So yeah, like AI is here, but it's not all there yet. Lexi, next slide, please. So I mentioned Imogen earlier. It's a photo generator. It is integrated into WordPress. And one of our panelists developed Imogen. So
yeah, that would be me, James.
Thank you. Sorry, I totally mind blanked there for a second.
No worries.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. So Aaron developed Imogen, and we will be digging into that process a little later. Then there's Bertha AI, also created by someone here. I believe. I might have got that research wrong. Anyway, Bertha AI is another deeply integrated thing that is a content generation plugin, and also allows you to create images. So it's using sort of the newer multimodal AI backends that are both image and text generators. Next slide, please. And then, of course, the call out to, I suppose, probably the most popular, if you just go on the fact that Jetpack is one of the most popular plugins generally, but the Jetpack AI Assistant, which was announced just before WordCamp EU 2023. So that was big news when I was at WordCamp as well. Again, integrated, able to generate content on demand, and in the nature of all sort of chat style AIs, also capable of sort of saying, well, hey, can I make this more formal? No, I prefer this to be a little less tone adjustment, as it's called. Thanks. So then a slightly different flavor of plugin is CodeWP, which specializes in helping you write WordPress plugins yourself. I believe it was trained on the WordPress code base, so it's actually specialized as opposed to sort of a general code plugin like GitHub Copilot. And so part of my talk at WordCamp EU was trying to get ChatGPT to write its own ChatGPT plugin for WordPress, which, considering the point of my talk was kind of AI is not there yet and we don't quite need to worry about it, it spectacularly failed at proving my point. I have not had a chance to try CodeWP to do the same thing. One day. Next slide, please. Okay, and with that, I'd really like to introduce you to our speakers. We've got Phil Crum, Aaron Edwards, Naisha Green, and Rob Howard. I'm just going to go in the order of the pictures on the slide here. And if I may, I'd like to ask each of our 4 wonderful guests to introduce themselves. Could you give us like a brief, the 30-second intro, who you are, where you work, what you do, and if you can fit it in, what is the most exciting application of AI that you've seen used so far? Ideally as a WordPress plugin, but not necessarily. So starting with Phil, take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you, James. And hello, everyone. My name is Phil Crum. I'm TANUP's Senior Vice President of Marketing and Growth, based out of a suburb of Las Vegas, Nevada. I wear a lot of different hats in my role, mostly responsible for working with our new clients, working with our partners, trying to help our organization think about how we can embrace technology and keep moving forward. Probably not a surprise, artificial intelligence in this entire ecosystem has been a major area of interest for us over the last year as we think about how it can improve the way that we do our work through developer-oriented experiences, how it can improve the way that content creators create content. We're a full-service agency. We specialize in finely crafted websites and tools for content creators, so the content creation experience is very close to our heart. And of course, thinking about what it can do for the reader experience as well. We have our own plugin, classifyplugin.com, that is kind of a sandbox for a lot of these experiences. And broadly, I'm very excited about different tools that help content creators work more efficiently. I'm sure we'll get into what I will confess is my skepticism for some of the other applications of AI, at least as it exists today. But there are, I think, very real impacts that can make content creators' life better. And we're just beginning to scratch the surface of what we can do with this tech.
For sure. Great. Thank you, Phil. Aaron, take it away.
Yes, I'm Aaron Edwards. I'm based in Dallas, and I started in WordPress way back in 2.6 as a plugin developer, and then eventually became CTO of WPMU Dev, and served there in that role more than 10 years. And just recently, I've moved to an advisory role there so that I could focus full time on my own projects, which have been very much centered around AI. So I released Imagine AI, which was the first AI image generator plugin. As soon as Stable Diffusion, its open source model, came out, I launched that. And then more recently, I've been working on DocSpot AI, which allows you to train custom chatbots on your company documentation and your WordPress content and site, so that you can have a frontline support agent, frontline pre-sales, and all those kind of things right on your site. So
great. Thank you very much. Next up, Naisha.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. I'm sorry I lost my voice, so I'm talking a little low, but I am Naisha. I'm a full stack WordPress developer. I'm also an instructor at LinkedIn Learning. While I was editorial director of Master WP, I got to do a series of articles on the ethical and moral implications of AI. So I'm kind of a AI fan because, of course, I grew up as a sci-fi, Star Wars, Star Trek child, but also I want to look at how we can use AI in a moral and educational way. And two plugins that I really like, and I'm not just saying this because Rob is here and 10 Up is here, but I really love Every Alt. It's been something I have not only used on my sites, but put on my freelance sites as well. I just love that it generates alt text or helps with it for images. I think combining it also with 10 Ups, is it Classify AI? I was reading up on it.
Classify
AI. I really like that it will automatically, you can set it to generate audio from your text and vice versa. I think it's going to be a really big win for accessibility. And I'm all about trying to learn more on accessibility. So those are my two favorite ones right now.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, Rob Howard. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob. My company is the developer of Every Alt, which Naisha just mentioned. You can also find me at innovatingwithai.com, where we do a lot of education for both developers and non-developers about how to sort of get into AI from a business and career and, basically future-proofing your career standpoint. So, we sort of see that as part of our mission, with Master WP, with our agency of bringing more voices into tech. Well, we want to also bring more voices into what we think is sort of the next generation of computing, which is AI. So more education and more, ways for people to get involved and get ahead. I think it's kind of a unique moment right now, kind of like if you were learning HTML in 1993, you'd have a head start on a lot of people who came in the decade later. I was fortunate enough to do that as a preteen basically in the 90s. And I think, get a head start. And I think there's a lot of opportunity now, 30 years later, to, get in on not just the, coding and programming, but also the sort of core knowledge around what is machine learning, what is really happening under the hood when you're seeing some of the stuff that can appear magical, right? And, parlay that into the future of your career, the future of, working on these products. And, as Naisha mentioned, with kind of the overarching goal of making sure that we're not just letting this stuff sort of go off the rails in the future, but we are, as the current, developer community, being very careful and thoughtful about how we implement it, when we implement it, why we implement it, and how it grows. Because ultimately, the people who are involved in building this stuff and putting products out to market are also going to shape not only how people think about AI, but sort of what the guardrails are on the future of it. So it's kind of a big project and a many, years and decades long project, but we're here now as tech fans and tech sort of producers in various capacities. So I think it's largely on us to do a good job with kind of the AI driven future.
Excellent. Any particular picks for an exciting AI use there?
Oh yeah, so one that I've been using that hasn't been mentioned is called Summarizes. So it is the word summarize with an S at the end, and it is in the plugin repo. There's a free and premium version, and basically it does a variety of different ways to summarize your content. So this can be something for an excerpt, something for meta description, and I think that has been a really cool use of language models that we've actually done elsewhere. Like we actually did this with our Slack, like our internal company Slack, where I said, hey, summarize this 20 comment Slack thread between two of my employees so I can read it in 10 seconds. And that is cool. The other thing that I've been using every day is not a WordPress plugin, but because we're all on Zoom meetings every day, I think we'll all be able to use this. It's called Fathom, and it records your video, transcribes your video, and produces an AI summary of all your Zoom meetings. And what's cool about it is it's like 10 times faster than the actual Zoom recording. So you can literally just send it instantly after the meeting, which for me makes a huge difference because, I had a meeting an hour ago, I've got another meeting an hour from now, and being able to just like quickly get that share link and send it to my team after the meeting means I'm not then switching back to that previous meeting 15 minutes later when I get the email that Zoom is done. So that's really cool just from a speed standpoint. But also you can do things like press the highlight button when your client is saying something important. It will then look at the 45 seconds around that highlight and summarize it for you in the transcript as like a sidebar. So there's so much stuff like that where it just dramatically speeds up my day-to-day note-taking and basically, eliminates my need to do note-taking, which is good for my brain because it's hard for my brain to switch between like a sales call. Like I can't take notes and be on a sales call and be on a development call and all those things in the same, few hours. So Fathom is cool. Otter, I see in the chat, is similar to it. There's also one called Grain, which I believe is audio only. So it's a little bit less full featured, but it's also less intrusive. I also think Zoom is going to buy a few of these in the next few years and make them more integrated into Zoom. So
I'm going to stop you there because that's a point I want to get to a little later.
All right, we'll come back. But video has been video recording and transcription is something that I see kind of as very big for my own productivity, even today.
Super handy. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to kick off into the actual questions now, if you don't mind. And first one, I'm going to direct at Phil, but I want all your opinions on all of this. So Classify, Phil, can you tell me a little bit about how you got to the place of creating it? And most specifically, I suppose I want to start addressing people's, the obvious concerns with AI. How are you making sure that it is being trained right and it's giving the correct answers?
Good question, and $1 million question here.
So
Classify is, I think at this point, a 3 or 4 year old plugin that was actually inspired by work that we were doing for a client. So it's called Classify because the original feature set was focused entirely on classifying content. At the time, back in the old days, IBM Watson, Microsoft Azure had a few different AI services that are a lot less powerful than many of the services that we'll be talking about later today. But they did a very good job of helping put content into buckets, basically. We were working with a client, a big legacy publisher who had 140, 150 years of archival content. And as part of a redesign and rebuild and a replatform to WordPress, they wanted to completely rethink the way that content was organized. We're talking several 100,000 pieces of content. So there's no real reasonable way for somebody to go through and manually curate all of those. And we realized that AI was a very, at that point, interesting and potentially useful tool to help us take that old library of content, put it into the right categories based on the site's new information architecture, and get us 95% of the way there. We still did some manual curating for higher volume content or things that were kind of cornerstone pieces of the archive, but really leaned heavily on AI. It worked really well. And 10up's general spirit and ethos is when we build something that we think is reusable across different problem spaces, different clients, we do it as a 10up investment. We don't charge the client for it, and we release it as an open source plugin. That's the genesis of Classify. That's the genesis of many of our other plugins like Distributor and ElasticPress that aren't AI based as well. Over time, that plugin's continued to grow and we've continued to evolve it. And as we've done that, we've started to think of applications of AI in the WordPress ecosystem as sitting into one of 4 buckets. There's developer experience, things like GitHub Copilot or WP CodeBot that help developers and engineers work more efficiently. There is what I'll call editorial enablement tools, how do you as a content creator work faster. There's content generation, self-explanatory. And then there's reader experience focused tools, things ranging from chatbots to content personalization. We have focused Classify primarily on editorial experience and editorial workflow improvements. We think that there's a lot of opportunity for AI to help content creators work faster and do better. But under the hood there's still this ethos of, I'll say, human empowerment rather than human replacement. As content creators, it is creative work, it is art, there's a lot of brain power involved in writing and even imagining good, high quality content. We're very skeptical about AI's ability to replace that, but we do think that it can make some of the more menial tasks in creating content, writing a summary, creating an audio transcription so the content's more accessible, making sure alt text is present on every image, making sure the content is categorized well, adding things like SEO titles and SEO descriptions that are very important, but kind of tedious to write, and provide that first pass at that for the human creator. The intention there is still for humans to be involved in the process, right? I, as a content creator, am now a reviewer rather than somebody who is writing and editing and reviewing and publishing, so that I can focus more as a content creator on the higher value work. We have thus far made a deliberate decision to avoid things like content generation, mostly for 2 reasons. One, I'm sure others here will have a different perspective than me, but that space of technology is still very nascent and still both very prone to error and very prone to real problems as far as bias goes, as far as perspective goes, and as far as homogeny goes, right? You get a lot of the same output. It has a very particular tilt and slant to the angle of it, which may or may not be what you want editorially. Even if it is what you want editorially, it is problematic in the spirit of creating a diverse and open web, right? We are skeptical in how much that will continue to evolve in the long term. You know, we're open-minded as technology gets better, as we get better at training these data sets, as we get better at understanding some of these implicit and explicit biases and how exactly we can help the technology defend itself against that. But for the time being, we have made a deliberate decision to kind of steer clear of that space. We think, at least for the enterprise publishers that we work with, that that ecosystem is just a little bit too new for the trade-offs to be worth it. So by focusing primarily on the human assistance angle, you still have that angle of human review, which I think is essential in any AI application. And you're working in a problem space where I don't want to say that those issues of bias and those issues of the reliability of training models entirely go away, but it's at least a little bit more of a controlled issue. You know, you're still writing the original content. You might be using AI to help you summarize it or help you simplify the language so it's more accessible to a broader audience. But you know the intention, you have hopefully been researching and fact-checking your own content. You as a human can provide a layer on top of that.
Great, thanks. I think that actually leads me very much into the next question, which is for Naisha, who has written several blog posts on AI at masterwp.com. It's clear that you have some reservations about AI. I think Phil has expressed some of them already. Can you expand on those a bit? Do you agree with Phil? Do you disagree at some point?
I agree with Phil 100%. I think that it's exciting technology. Again, as an AI sci-fi child, I was so ready when ChatGPT released to play with it, and I've done so many things with it, and I think it's very helpful. But the biases that are there and the ethical implications that we see in the news from different things that ChatGPT has done, well, OpenAI, because that's Dolly too. I was gonna say Dolly, but they're just so massive. And even using some of them, as you'll see in some of my writing, especially the image generating software, it's so biased in the ways of race and gender. We talked about at Master WP when I did Lens AI, and a lot of my friends, the women, you could be fully clothed. The women would return without clothing sometimes in their pictures, which was odd. And, you know, talking to men who did it, it was like, no. So I'm with Phil 100%. While I am a fan and I'm still navigating it, again, I want to find that ethical boundary, because is there ethical consumption under capitalism? But I want to find it, and I'm still going to experiment with it. But the biases are really great right now.
Great. I suppose bringing this back to WordPress and plugins, do you have any concern? Like, are any of the concerns that you've expressed specific or not specific to WordPress, but specifically applicable, like exacerbated by WordPress, by for want of a better word, pluginifying things?
So far, no, but I'm sure that it's there because a lot are based off OpenAI and ChatGPT. So yeah, I'm sure that there. Any specific ones I can't call out right now. I'm not being shy. I just can't. I would, but yeah.
No, fair enough. Okay, great. So kind of continuing in that vein, Aaron, AI has a bad reputation, again, for sometimes not producing the right answers. We've talked quite a bit about that. In cases where you're training an AI model yourself, like with
DocSpot.
Sorry?
DocSpot AI.
DocSpot AI, thank you. I wanted to say, never mind. Tongue twisters. How do you think AI can be trained more accurately to answer a question about product or services? Yeah, I suppose that's. Let me leave it there. I'll dig in if there's more to come out of it.
For sure. So one of the biggest issues that people run into with these large language models like ChatGPT is what we call hallucinations, to where it can very confidently lie to you and make up facts and things like that that are just not true, but very convincingly are true to a human eye without doing the research. So that's something that we constantly have to be careful for. And for a product like mine, DocSpot, which is designed to like answer support questions for your users, for your customers, you obviously do not want it making up facts about your product or just making up answers. So that is one of the
that RM minus RF is the right solution for you.
Right. Yes. So we use a fairly new technique called retrieval augmented generation, and essentially the easiest way to describe it is if you took your document and then pasted it in ChatGPT and then asked a question about it. And so that way it has the context from the documentation that you wrote already to be able to answer the question. And that's kind of what we do. It's much more complicated, but we scan all your documentation, all your WordPress website, all that content, and then use different AI techniques to try to identify when a customer asks a question, try to identify, okay, what little piece of your documentation is most likely to contain an answer. And then we pass that in the back end to ChatGPT so that it can answer the question with some context, with some facts to be able to answer from. And that's kind of the whole product in a nutshell. So that's one technique. There's other techniques that are just being experimented with, like fine tuning for AI, to where you fine tune it with maybe patterns of how you want it to respond with previous conversations, or the style, the tone of voice that you want. Those are very new technologies, and there's very few products that have taken advantage of that yet. Kind of a new frontier there, but it's a way to give content generation or answering and that kind of thing your own tone, your own voice, to have some better control that way.
Awesome, thanks. Moving on to Rob. So your company has 2 AI products on the market, Business English and EveryAlt.
Yes.
Neither of them are focused on content generation. Can you start off by telling me a little bit more about them, what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So EveryAlt is both a WordPress plugin and an independent API. So you can plug it into anything. We're actually building a Chrome extension right now that I just talked to some people at WordCamp about last week. And then, we have people who want to build it into Kajabi, which is a course platform, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, you hit our API with an image, like a JPEG URL. We are then going to send back to you our best recommendation for what the alternative text of that image should be. And I'll talk a little bit more about sort of how we handle the hallucination and like incorrect answers questions in a second. And the other one is called Business English. It's intended for people who are working day to day in English with clients who speak only English in some cases, but want to really take that sort of next couple steps up into fluency. So this is something that, a lot of our own employees and contractors deal with on a day-to-day basis. And, anybody who learns English as a second language knows that getting to 80% might take you 2 years, but getting to 100% might take you the rest of your life, right? So there's so much of that nuance and challenge there. So we built that as both a Slack app and a Chrome extension. And basically what you can do is give it a few different contexts. Like, for example, I want to send a chat, I want to send an email, I want to send a social media message, and just feed it whatever you want. It can be your own English, even if you're not a fluent speaker. It can be something in another language like Spanish or Hindi, and it will give you back what we think is, the best sort of like professionalized office business English. And you can use that as you see fit. You can edit it, etc. But the idea is that it's almost like a universal translator in some ways for the office setting. So to touch on a couple of the things that we talked about in the last few minutes, EveryAlt doesn't really generate content, but there is a challenge around accuracy in that, right? And there's also challenges around bias and training the data correctly, right? So, they call it red teaming, right? When you say, hey, go break this, make this say something offensive, make this give you something that is like flagrantly wrong, right? So, the image recognition tools have gotten a lot better in the last 5 to 8 years. It's actually one of the older types of AI, and it even dates back to like CAPTCHAs, like show me click on all the crosswalks, click on all the motorcycles, right? That's all basically feeding image recognition models, right? So there were a bunch of really high profile issues with just like miscategorizing human beings as things that are not human beings, which obviously was a problem back in like the 2015, 2016 era when this is coming out. But we wanted to make sure that we weren't like running into similar problems with EveryAlt, because you can upload an image of anything, right? So one of the things that we red teamed, well, first I'll say the philosophy here is like, you must accept that this new technology is going to have errors, right? So the question is, do you want to not use it, or do you want to become the person who has expertise in solving the most difficult problems, which are the errors that AI is producing? So for the folks that are here watching, like, I want to inspire you, if you're interested in this, not to set it aside until the errors are solved, but to be the person that solves those problems, right? And that's an area where you don't have to be a perfect, like amazing coder. Like you don't have to, be super advanced at this, but you want to bring your unique subject matter expertise, mix that in with the AI that exists today, and then create something that produces a better result than anyone else has produced before. So that sort of mixing together of your unique skills and expertise and perspective with the imperfect tools that exist to produce something that is better than the sum of its parts is an opportunity, I think, for everybody who is even adjacently involved in WordPress or software to like do really cool stuff here. So specific to EveryAlt, one of the things that we did a lot of custom coding on, right? So we're not just taking what the AI gives us and spitting it out. We're actually post-processing everything. And one of the things that we post-processed very heavily was references to gender and physical appearance, because what it will do is it will say a woman with glasses or old man holds a baby and stuff like that. And what we realized is that those are areas where inaccuracy can cause major issues and actually cause you to not want to use that software anymore. Even something that is, as simple as categorizing someone as an old woman versus a woman, like maybe I don't think I'm old, right? Maybe I don't want you to be saying that about me in the alt text or whatever. So, with stock photos, it's not as big of a deal. But once you get into like photos of real people, like it can be an issue, right? And then it would do weird things like focus on a person wearing glasses or a person wearing shoes and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, like that comes off as just like nonsensical in some cases, because that's not a big component of the picture that you're wearing shoes, right? Like that's kind of assumed, but that was coming up a lot. So one of the things that we did was we actually intentionally gender neutralized and generalized a lot of the references to people. So it's not going to say a woman, it's going to say a person in most cases, because even if 1% of those scenarios, the person is non-binary or we're misclassifying someone's gender or appearance in some way, like we want to completely avoid that, even at the expense of being more generalized about the physical appearance or the gender identity of a person, because the software doesn't need to make that attempt. It's not that big of a deal from an alt text standpoint. I'd rather say a person and always be correct than run into that diversity issue, right? Yeah.
In the interest of time, fascinating.
Sorry.
But we can go into this for ages. I appreciate.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate
it. That red teaming is one of the ways to address that. Yeah.
Thank you. So back to Phil. It's already come up. ChatGPT is, it's the generic term for AI at the moment. You can't talk about AI without bringing up ChatGPT. So just this morning, I was actually doing some research for this, and ChatGPT was down. And it struck me that most of the AI tag plugins on WordPress.org integrate with ChatGPT. Most of them are content generation things. And if ChatGPT goes down, all of those plugins effectively go down, right? So do you think that there is enough competition to ChatGPT in the AI space? How do you think that affects WordPress plugins generally?
It is really hard to train an AI model, right? And the benefit that GPT has is the massive investment that Microsoft and others have made in them. I have a hard time imagining, I don't want to say anyone else catching up, because as time goes on, there will probably become more intermediary services that help provide you with data sets to train your models, and you can filter out the information that you're interested in. As with all things in computing, stuff gets exponentially cheaper as it gets a little bit more aged and a little bit less of a new novel technology. It depends a lot on the use case, right? GPT, I think, has a very real leg up, and it will probably be years before it has a real competitor in that very large corpus of data set, very open-ended prompt kind of world. But there are specific tools, whether it be by big companies like Azure, which I mentioned earlier, AWS has some AI APIs, IBM Watson, that are very good for specific problems that have much more tailor-made and specifically trained models that can actually produce better results. I think you're right to note that the proclivity of GPT-powered plugins in the WordPress space is because content generation is kind of the low-hanging fruit, right? I don't want to demean any of those plugins, and that I know some of them have some interesting thinking around them, but it can literally be as simple as take prompt that author has entered in WP admin, provide verbatim to GPT-4 API, maybe with a little bit of context around it, and get something spit out. It is very technologically innovative in terms of what we could have done 3 or 4 years ago, but the plugins are really just a wrapper on top of the API. Those other services are a little bit less straightforward to implement. IBM Watson, for instance, lets you train your own models, lets you provide your own data sets. It is more work and a little bit more upfront investment to use to its full utility, but you can get much better outcomes. I think I would leave this with 2 takeaways as a plugin author, somebody interested in this ecosystem. Number one, look for problems to solve that are a little bit less trivial than just take data, submit verbatim to API endpoint, get result back. We have more than enough of those already. We don't need another one. And 2, think really hard about the problem that you are trying to solve, right? A lot of these AI solutions are very open-ended because these APIs are so powerful. They don't really solve a specific problem as much as they provide a utility. And the real way that we both provide value to website owners, to content creators, the real way that we innovate, and the real way that we can start thinking about, to Rob's explanation earlier, what are some of the issues of bias? What are some of the issues of the way that this technology will work versus the actual outcomes we're trying to generate here? We can then build whatever safety nets we need, whether it be training a custom model through IBM Watson, whether it be filtering the results that come back like every alt does, and really focus on both solving a real and valuable problem, differentiating ourselves against a huge suite of competitors that are really just GPT API wrappers, and be in a much better position to think hard about what it means to innovate, what it means to solve some of these challenges, and how we can build a solution that both does the best it can in this world now and be in a position to recognize when technology iterates and evolves and be able to take advantage of the new generation of tools that I'm sure a year from now, if we have this conversation, we'll be talking about a wildly different set of problems, a wildly different set of applications and tools. And if you know what you're trying to solve and who you're trying to do it for, you can take advantage of that in a lot more meaningful way, I think.
I think just briefly summarizing that, if there's one thing AI isn't taking away, it's good design, or isn't replacing. It's putting thought into design. I want to move on a bit, sort of a segue, I suppose. Naisha, you recently had a blog post up about WordCamp Asia, where you covered Matt Mullenweg's AMA about layoffs in the WordPress community. Get into the hard questions, I suppose. The big question is obviously AI, is it going to take my job? Again, do you think the WordPress community is particularly vulnerable, given that like most of the plugins do seem to be content generation, and a lot of the jobs in the WordPress community are content generation jobs?
Yes, I do. Sorry to say that.
No. Great, take it away.
As someone who's generates content, yes, it is a very big competitor. Knowing people in advertisement who've been laid off in their job, they straight up told them like, we are using ChatGPT. Or people who are in SEO, people are like, well, it's easier to use a AI plugin. Definitely, it's definitely going to and has cost people some jobs. That's why I'm trying to get to the space where it's like, okay, there's the moral, ethical implications. There's the risk of it taking my job. How do I get to a position by using it to make myself secure in my job future? And that's actually something I've been working on, using it to actually learn. I know someone said in the comments, we haven't really talked about how it's helping education. ChatGPT specifically and Bard, I've used Bard too. They are so helpful for teaching. I've learned so many things in the past year, well, almost year, just by saying, hey, can you teach me this step by step? Or can you teach me this like I have to teach it to someone else? And it's been great. So yes, people have and will lose their jobs, but I think we should put a push on educating ourselves to get ahead of that curve. And if we do, we can find something else.
I think one of Matt's, I totally agree. And I think that kind of jives with one of Matt's takeaway points at WordCamp EU. 10 years ago, roughly, he was saying, learn JavaScript deeply. And this time it's learn AI deeply. So another thing that I'd like to touch on, and I'm going to address this to Aaron. So large language models, which are sort of the fundamental AI model behind things like ChatGPT and Bard, they are massively computationally intensive. There's the obvious concerns about power consumption, but also given the computation and power requirements, for me at least, it's hard to see LLMs getting integrated into WordPress plugins and being able to be run on my local hosting company, the guy down the road who has 10 servers in his garage, or even more to the point, my server under the stairs back home. Do you think that there's a future for small AI plugins in the WordPress plugin ecosystem, or are we all going to have to sort of buy into the big three?
That's a
ChatGPT. Sorry, go ahead.
That's a very good point. Obviously, hosting doesn't have fancy GPUs and the requirements that are needed to host some of these really large, powerful language models. So it's hard to see how we get to that point. I think as AI becomes more ubiquitous, maybe that becomes a very important part of hosting providers, that they need to provide GPUs so you can run your own models. And we have seen very exciting developments in the last few months with more open source models. For example, Meta, Facebook releasing Llama 2 and Llama 2 code gen models, which are very much comparable stats wise to ChatGPT, the 3.5 version. And that's something that you can train on top of and fine tune and even use for commercial uses. So while it does require specialized hardware and probably servers that your plugins will talk to, it can be run on your own servers now, or at least servers that you have more control over. So I do think we'll see some progress, and there's even been progress in very tiny language models that are fine-tuned to a very specific task, like classifying content or even things like what EveryAlt is doing. And those can run on just your normal computer hardware, very, very small graphics chips. So I do think that we will move towards that. It'll be a while though.
One thing that they're working on right now is literally a LLM that can run on your iPhone independently of the internet, right? So it's much smaller, as Aaron said, but I think that's, a real thing. And then, I think the next level of that is that your iPhone is more powerful than the first spaceship that landed on the moon in terms of computing power. So, those things are 60 years apart, but like, the degree of potential advance in processing technology is sometimes hard to fathom. So even if it's not 5 years, like it could be 30 years from now, but you could have an LLM in every device in your home, for example, and that wouldn't be crazy. It wouldn't be any crazier than the fact that I have the iPhone in my pocket every day compared to what it was like in the 60s or 70s.
Yeah, absolutely. One day we will get to the Star Trek computer.
Yes.
Rob, whilst you're unmuted, I suppose one of the last things that I want to ask is, we've discussed a lot of the obvious stuff. What are the non-obvious things where you think AI would be a real sort of step to the next level? And also, I suppose part of the same question, what are the things that we've just completely missed out on? The easy, low-hanging fruit that no one's done. No, sure. I totally won't steal your idea and make a business out of
it. Okay, so I'm going to take the harder, the high hanging fruit first, because one of the things that I think we will eventually get to, and it is kind of Star Trek-esque, if you will, is the AI that can interpret the world around you. So, the self-driving car is one of the examples of this, that people have, had this idea for many years. It's not quite fully baked yet. But when I think about EveryAlt, one of the things that we want to do is make it easier to experience the internet as a visually impaired person or somebody who has a disability. There's all sorts of other stuff that you can do now with the combination of image recognition, video recognition, language understanding. Imagine a world where you can put on a visor and you can see, or you can hear audio description of the world around you. Like, those are computational challenges, but it's not that much different than what we're doing with a WordPress plugin today. I want to take an image of something that the video camera can see, or the photo camera can see, and describe it, right? So when you think about that, and you think about things like prosthetics, or ways to help people who have physical disabilities or cognitive impairments, these are things that we are going to start to see those. It's going to be very freaky, right, at first, because it's like you're mixing the medical and the technology. But there was something where machine learning helped create essentially an implant in someone's spine that allowed them to move their legs again, right? Yeah. So it was basically replicating what your spine would do, taking that signal from the top of your neck to your hips, skipping over the section of the spine that was damaged and couldn't communicate with the lower body. And now that person can walk around with a walker. So just like crazy stuff like that, that is a level that is many steps beyond a WordPress plugin, but it's essentially the same machine learning concepts that are being applied to these much more life-changing, experiences or potential changes.
Great, thanks. Considering we don't have much time left, and I want to give the audience Q&A a bit of space, so I'm going to hand it back to Lexi to deal with Q&A.
Yes. Hey, everyone. Lots of questions. And honestly, I feel like we could all just like continue to talk on this and provide no concrete actionable things. But circling this back to plugins, I will just kind of ambiguously ask a couple of these, but related specifically to WordPress. How do you feel AI is or will help with accessibility? I know this is a topic of WordPress.
I'll give an interesting idea in my mind. I love this new concept of chat UI or chat UX, to where you type in what you want and then it creates it. For example, we're seeing that with some of the form building plugins, like WS Forms, I think, and Jetpack Forms, to where you type in what kind of fields you want, that kind of thing, and it creates it for you. So you don't need to visually see it. You don't need to know where all the buttons are, those kinds of things. I feel like those kind of interfaces open that kind of a new way of interacting with your apps or plugins.
Totally. Great answer. I'm just going to keep going. We've got a bunch of questions, and sorry, everyone, I don't think we will get through them all. But talking front end, back end development specifically, has anyone on the panel seen anything actually effective in the front end design world with AI yet?
I've been interested in some of the experimentation Joe Hoyle at Human Made has been doing in terms of generating block editor layouts based on prompts. I realize that isn't the strictest definition of front-end engineering, but as we get into this full-site editing world and have a lot more empowerment in the tools in WordPress, I think that tools like that lean on AI to create more novel and interesting experiences will go a long way in helping folks like me who are not designers, not particularly aesthetically capable, to do more innovative and interesting things.
Totally. I think we are just opening the door, and we're about to start running through that door. Cool. I'm going to take just one more question or kind of general topic, and then we'll do some closing thoughts. But does anyone have any thoughts on the impact that our AI plugins or AI that we're running on our sites has on SEO purposes?
So Google says as long as it's high quality content, it does not care how it's generated. It does not specifically try to detect or penalize or reward AI generated content. I think the key there is recognizing that it is easy to create content that isn't high quality with AI. The longer term issue of what happens to search engine results when they're chat oriented is an interesting and sticky one. For those of you who are at WordCamp US or watched the live stream, Matt talked a little bit about this. Bing, I think, does a very good job of referencing the source material for answers. ChatGPT, some Google tools have a longer way to go there. I would like to think we'll end up in a world where attribution is still a very important part of the AI interaction process, and there will still be a place for providing the canonical source of truth for content, because you will still be available as a deeper tool for places to go to. But you're basically taking it on faith at this point. I don't think there's much we can do outside of advocacy as a community at this point to that end.
Totally. Cool. That being said, top of the hour, any closing thoughts, Rob, that you want to add on here?
Sure. So one thing that I would encourage everybody to learn more about, and it kind of touches on what Phil just said, is the various copyright and intellectual property, questions and changes that are going to come out of this. We didn't really have time to talk much about that, but it's going to touch everyone and everything. And just, generally, I encourage you as a software fan, a developer, a WP Engine user, dive in, get your feet wet with this new technology, get over that hurdle of being kind of a little bit worried or scared about it, and start using it and be that person who becomes that expert and brings change and positive growth to this new area of computing down the road.
Absolutely. Knowing we are out of time, I just want to give a huge thank you to all 4 panelists and to James here, who hosted this discussion. It's not an easy thing to talk about, and everyone in this room was so confident about it. And I think we could do one of these every week for the rest of the year and still not even bridge the surface. Nice to meet everyone virtually again. I did get to meet these people at WordCamp US. If you're registered, we will send out the recording. Happy Tuesday, and we'll catch y'all at the next one.
Thank you so much. It's been great
Thanks,
fun.
everyone.